Hey, Melanie, how's it going?
Derek.
Please.
Well, recently I've done some travel. As part of the Sotheby's International Realty Network of real estate advisors, we get together with other advisors regionally, nationally throughout the year. And I was just at a conference in Jersey City, New York City, doing a lot of networking and sort of expanding my frame about how we serve our clients.
You're actually bringing up something that I think ties in with today's topic, which is rooting in the community. And so, as an advisor, when you work with your clients, and particularly those who are becoming homeowners, how do you help them think about rooting in a community if they're new to one, or maybe I don't know, maybe you want to say how you might think about how you root in a community.
Yeah. I will say, speaking about the metropolitan Boston area, that question at this point comes with its own privilege. You know, not everyone gets to choose where they're going to root, honestly, because of how expensive and competitive uh, much of the Boston area is. So, you know, one, there's assuming that someone can be choosy in a broad way. And then if they can be choosy, or to the extent that they can be choosy, we're thinking about their life now and in 5 years, 10 years. So, how are their needs likely to evolve, and how can the community support that? So, whether that's they're not yet partnered and they think they might be in the next few years, or they might or might not be partnered, but they think they might become a parent in the next few years, or do they think they might need to accommodate the needs of elder relatives? So that's the kind of timeline trajectory set of questions to think about. But then there's also what's around you in that time. What are the services? What's the access to transportation, access to parks, but also like how close and how easily can your other people get to you if you have certain needs, like if you're a new parent, can your friends easily get to you to be a support system? All those things really are really practical. And then there's the cultural overlay. There is, what am I doing when I'm not working? Who am I hanging out with? How am I getting civically engaged? Um, what's the fabric of life on the weekend, in the evenings, that actually supports the kind of way that I want to develop as a person? All of those questions are up for consideration if you're going to reroute somewhere, or you've been somewhere for a while and you're thinking about, as a lot of my first time homebuyer clients say, put down roots somewhere. Are your friends going
Hmm.
to stay? If you want to stay, are your friends also going to be able to afford to stay? I mean, these are all just really practical questions people need to think about.
Right. And it's interesting that you say, can someone be choosy
Yeah.
with a community? Because when I think about the times when I was rerouting, and particularly when I moved back to Boston, I moved specifically back to Roxbury. It's not so much that was it a question of could I be choosy? It was I being chosen to become or to be part of the community? So even though I was from that neighborhood, from Roxbury, from Boston, because I had lost my accent a while ago, and because a lot of people who had been there for years and years and years hadn't seen me before, they were like, "Well, are you really from Roxbury? Are you really from Boston?" There was this hesitancy to have me be, I don't want to say one of the fold, but just to really take me in as part of the community. And it was just an interesting process. I didn't feel like I had to prove that I was from Roxbury because I knew I was from there, and I didn't try to
Mm.
prove myself. I just did what I needed to do to live there and feel like this was my home. And I think over time, I I felt chosen, even though it was a place that I was from. So it was just this very
Interesting.
strange mix, this
Yes.
very strange blend of feelings and access and lack of access that I had to sort of break into in order to really feel like I was in community and building and growing roots in the community.
But Derek, you know what that makes me think of? It sounds to me, even though you were born and bred there, that you had to earn your way back in. And I think that some of that has to do with particularly Roxbury being a historically Black neighborhood, and historically Black because of generations of redlining. Like, this is where Black people could root and stay. That needs to be a place that's protected. And so I think there also then develops all of these cultural modes of, are you part of us or are you not? Do we have to watch you? And so I think that's really relevant. And you take someone like me, I've lived in Boston now almost 20 years, it'll be 20 years next year. I moved into a neighborhood that does have a lot of intergenerational, interclass mixing in life, but there also is a constant influx. So transients aren't necessary, or not transients, but folks who are moving in aren't necessarily looked at askew or tracked in quite the same way. So I was able to move into the neighborhood of Jamaica Plain and build community because there was a wave of people who were doing that at that time, and there continues to be. I watch it, artists, activists, um, academics, people in the medical field. You just kind of expect that influx. But then there are some places where if that influx is starting out of seemingly nowhere, people are going to be really on guard. So I think all of those things are relevant, again, about who gets chosen and who gets to choose.
Yeah. As part of this is making me think about our conversation with Sheena around building power through real estate. Also, our conversation with Melinda about purchasing and growing your business roots there.
Oh,
And some of the other conversations that we've had that I don't want to if you haven't seen those episodes, you should watch them. But let's bring in today's guest. So I'm curious to hear what she'll have to say about building community and rooting in the community as well.
yes, another Boston area local, I believe born and raised in Cambridge, just outside of Boston. Nyacko Perry is a diversity and equity and inclusion coach and consultant specializing in leadership development and organizational change. She has worked with individuals and organizations engaged in healing, transformation, and equity for over a decade. Since 2017, Nyacko has co-owned and helped set the organizational foundation of Comfort Kitchen, yay, an award-winning cafe by day and restaurant by night, celebrating flavors and ingredients of the African diaspora, global comfort food, connected from Asia to the Americas. Nyacko holds an MS in organizational development with distinction from American University and is a certified coach accredited through the International Coaching Federation. This summer, Nyacko and her spouse purchased their first home together, and they share with their multi-generational household. And I know that well because I had a role in them landing that home. We're very excited to have our friend Nyacko here with us.
Yes. Hi, everyone. Good to see you
Hey,
both.
welcome.
I loved listening to the discussion before about being in and out of community and kind of the sensations of that, like what that can feel like. And what was coming up for me when I was listening was just that every community that we enter, and I'll speak for myself, every community I enter is whole and intact. It has culture, it has history, it has its own way of engaging. And there has to be some steps on learning and figuring that out. And for some of us, we already know it because we grew up in it. For other people, there's like a learning that is humbling at times, but I think necessary. So that's kind of what was coming up as I entered the room.
Thank you.
I appreciate that. Well, first, congratulations on your new home. Want to
Thank
definitely say
you.
that. But I fully appreciate what you're saying about how every community is whole and intact before we enter. Because again, having been in the community and then left, it's not like I left a hole. The community, was fine without me all that time. And then I came back and expected that hole to still be there. And of course it wasn't. So I appreciate you setting that as a framework for thinking about becoming rooted in a community or leaving a community and coming back.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I guess like more specifically as a former Cambridge resident, and then moving to being in Dorchester for over a decade, and now in Hyde Park fairly recently, it's very, feels very alive in me, this entering and inquiry and being open and respectful of what's there. Growing up in Cambridge, there's so many different cultures in Cambridge, just as there is everywhere else. But some themes that I experienced was in some communities, and specifically communities of color, there is an expectation to greet and say hello and to greet the elders. It was a very normalized thing for me. And then as I started to encounter more of the people that are in flux that aren't necessarily from the neighborhood, there's less of that. There's a lot less of, hello, how are you? And I had this interesting experience. I grew up in an apartment building and someone had moved upstairs, and we were both in, the hallway, and that person just wouldn't greet me. Like, they were doing everything they could not to greet me, just sort of like looking around. And I'm like, it would be a lot less awkward if we just said hello right now. But there was like no desire to do that. It was like, I'm not trying to break this wall. So yeah, like just growing up in Cambridge and kind of experiencing that range of things. I really like to get to know people, and I like to connect. And there is a kind of gap and a hole for me when someone will do anything they can not to make contact in that way.
Yeah.
And I wonder if that's I don't want to say a very Boston or even a very New England thing, or even a very Northeast thing, because I do have friends who are from the South and from the Midwest who very often comment and say, you New Englanders, you Bostonians, you folks from the Northeast, you're so cold. Maybe not so much the Philadelphians or the folks from DC, but they definitely say that about the New Englanders. The closer you get to Boston, it seems like we're the bullseye out of that. And I've always kind of pushed back against that. Yeah. As a native Bostonian, I know Melony and I have had these conversations, I feel, in the past. But as a native Bostonian, I always kind of feel like we're not necessarily cold. We're just a little bit more reserved and guarded. Mm-hmm. And once you break the shell, once you crack the shell and you're in, it's kind of like those Cadbury eggs. You crack the shell and like the gooey inside is there, and then like a Bostonian is your friend for life.
Yes.
So, and I don't necessarily feel that the other way around. So like if I go to places where people are always saying, hello, how are you, blah, 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 blah. And I'm like, I'm like, what do you want? What do you want? What are we getting from this? And, maybe that's my New England or my Northeast sort of suspicions sort of like coming out. But I feel like there is some cultural difference in terms of how communities operate in different parts of the country. Melony, what would be your take on that?
I mean, I'm listening to this and I'm just thinking, and how does that all overlay with the thing that we're all vigilant about, which is the effects of gentrification, these influxes of people who might not know how to relate. But what does that come with? If you can't relate and you can't build community with the people around you, that also has its implications for all kinds of policy, zoning policy for one, right? Yeah. Zoning decisions, all the way to other kinds of like electoral politics decisions. But I'm also continually holding this kind of irony that the neighborhood that I've lived in for almost 20 years is a neighborhood that is actually very neighborly and very friendly and engaging, and where people want to look out for their neighbors. But you pay a premium for that. Do you know what I'm saying? Like,
you mean like a cost premium, like dollars premium?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. So all of these things, there is a price. There is a price. There's either a neighborhood has been closed off, and so it's sort of has a shell around it, understandably, or a neighborhood is a little bit more permeable, where you have more and more transplants, right? And there's a current for being able to flow into that community and make friends fast and have all kinds of arts and community activities, outdoor and indoor and year round, like that, and green space and the parks and people working from home outdoors, and they're walking their dogs, and there's dog bakery, like that, you pay a premium. So just to
So it's like is it like a financial gated community?
It's interesting. I mean, I think gate has its own implications. So, but I see what you're saying by financially gated, not necessarily security gated, not like police gated, but yeah.
What you said was making me think about how people discuss different neighborhoods. So that can even just be adjacent. So when you think about one neighborhood, like the one where you live, yes, it is wealthier. There's more outdoor, there's more indoors, there's more this, there's more that, and it's known for that. and then you take a neighborhood just right next to it, which may have a lot of arts and culture, but it's not necessarily for sale. It's not necessarily like, okay, I'm going to take my culture and turn it into a piece of clothing, or turn it into a mask, or turn it into something that's consumable. The culture is the community. The culture is the way the community behaves. And as such, it's not for sale. It's for enjoyment, communal enjoyment. And I think, and I think when I think about certain neighborhoods like that, they are, I won't say they're devalued, but they aren't valued as much as the one where you can consume and purchase things. So I'm not exactly sure where I'm going with that.
Like brand identity that has a different currency. I see what you're saying about the for sale aspect, but I think the for sale aspect, I just want to keep drawing this back to the land. The for sale aspect is because people can buy and trade property in a community like that very easily. There is a constant demand for it. People will pay a premium for it. You own as your first home, often typically a condo, let's say a 2-bedroom apartment in a triple decker building. In 3, 4, 5, 6 years, you decide to go to your next thing. You're going to be able to sell that condo very well without hesitation. So that brand comes with a kind of currency that's related to how much the land is worth. And so it's not just about cultural identity being for sale or not. It's about, what does it mean to own property here, pay rent here, live here versus another location? And I would just say, if you're saying that a Roxbury is not for sale, I would say maybe not, but up underneath and behind, and in some ways it could end up being. And so these are all things to think about, right? That's what the South, the South End, just right up on what is now understood to be Roxbury, and South End used to be part of Roxbury. So, South End is a very Tony, hard to afford neighborhood. So I just think, I just want to trouble uncomfortable. So let's talk about what's uncomfortable.
I'm going to trouble a little bit more because the way, so I almost feel like we are talking about two overlapping things at the same time.
Okay.
So I feel like when we're talking about the land and the businesses, we're talking about a neighborhood. When we're talking about the people and the culture, we're talking about community. And of course, there's overlay. Of course, there's overlay amongst all of that. But I feel like when we're talking about rooting in the community, in some ways, I'm thinking more about how do you sort of become part of the people and the culture, which of course is tied to how do you access it through your rent or through your mortgage or through whatever process of purchase you do. So there's an overlap there that I think we can sort of trouble and play with.
Yes, I just feel like I need to do a little more layer at this. I agree with you wholly, and thank you for making the distinction and describing so elegantly the overlay. And I'm just reminded of our conversation with Sheena Collier, who, once she decided to really give Boston a go, because she really couldn't find community here, she had landed in Fort Hill, right? A certain section of Roxbury, right? With a certain level of political power, connections. And she was able to just, in this very granular way, start having people over for house parties and brunches. And so she did that there and found like-minded, like-lifed people there, right? But would she have been able to do that somewhere else in the same way? Could she have afforded the rent somewhere else to stay long enough to do that? And so I'm just saying that, as you said, the cost of the financing for a mortgage or the cost of the rent is going to dictate. And I'm just saying it's not just happenstance, it's racialized. It's totally racialized. It's totally racialized.
Right.
So the communities that feel like intact, where it's like, our culture is not for sale, we're just us. I'm like, at some point that culture is going to get commodified. But in the meantime, people are trying to hold on to their regular life and there's stuff encroaching all around. And I just,
So let's get back to Nyacko, our guest. Help us cut through the noise. Tell us what you did.
Well, I'm with you. I'm following this track because everything about Comfort Kitchen is like jumping in here
You
because
know,
I'm
part
just
of it.
thinking about culture, and for Comfort Kitchen is a reaction. Like it's okay, we have all these people of color, all of these immigrants that work in restaurants. Their stories are not told, their food is not shared. It's a reaction. It's like, let's create something that is like, no, this is it. We're going to do it different. We're going to show you something different. We're going to tell you something different. And then in order for us to do it, we've got to raise $1 million. We got to do we got to do a bunch of other stuff. Get a bunch of loans, do all these things, build relationships, build partnerships with, loan officers, but the city, just a lot of political work actually to get it going. Um, and then we're in this community, we're in Uphams Corner, which is the most diverse neighborhood in America. And we're like, yes, this is the place. We love it. We love the location itself. And we are entering. So we had a lot of like, okay, how are we entering? How do we want to enter the space? How can we be respectful of what is there? And I think the fact that it took us so long was of benefit. It took us over 3 years to do it. That was a benefit in the sense that we were able to kind of do it slowly, because I think community is slow.
Yeah.
Like it's a slow process. It's not like, all right, we're gonna have a big party, everybody. No, that's not. So we had this kind of slow, granular experience of engaging with different aspects of the community and trying to invite people to things, and we're still doing that, and it's still a process, and we represent something different because we are a reaction. We are a different kind of restaurant intentionally. We are looking for national representation. Like we want people to know this is something, we are trying something here, not just in the food that we're offering, which is a big part of it, but in our finances and how we're working, how we're engaging with our staff. So we're plopping something very new into a place, so there is going to be natural like reactions to that and thoughts about it, which generally, we receive a lot of positive feedback. We also receive people that are like, why'd you go to Dorchester? This should be in Cambridge. This should be in JP. So we're kind of, and that is like a dagger in our heart kind of every time. It's very frustrating. But yeah, the question, why do we choose it? We chose it because of first of all, the building itself, beautiful, and could literally be anywhere. Could be anywhere in the world. It's quite a unique building. But the neighborhood itself, it has a beautiful history, and we like the idea of being in a place like this that has legacy, that has community, and being able to offer something to it. But it's a very complicated relationship.
Yeah.
That has to be very intentional, and we're always thinking about it, and they're always thinking about us, and we're working on it.
Can you share any, and I'm just keeping in mind too, for our audience who may not know, Comfort Kitchen is, in all these ways that Nyacko has said, special, and it feels special as a guest. You really feel like you're in a place that is, it's being like your experience is being curated, and you're like your wholeness as a human is being thought about, and the people who are around you were attracted there on purpose too. It really just feels special in that way. Mm-hmm. And also, cynically, I will say there also then tends to become a kind of cachet about that, right? So like the New York Times has recognized Comfort Kitchen, right? And so I'm so proud and so impressed and so rah, 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 rah. And at the same time, it's like, so how do you anchor to the politics that got you to build this thing so laboriously in the midst of pandemic lockdown, to build this thing that is now has traction and it's becoming a draw? How does that then grow and breathe with the neighborhood that it is based in?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. One is, I will say, this is all by design, to be clear. We know, because we have all these loans, how much money we need to make to be able to survive. We're very clear about that. This is an everyday conversation with Vipla and I and other people on the team of like, we need to hit certain numbers to be able to pay staff in a way that feels in alignment to our values. And a lot of our staff are from the neighborhood. So we're very clear about what that would mean, which means we do need recognition. We do need, so, even if we have, because I think we had maybe like a lull of 1 month, we were like, okay, we're feeling it. Like
Yeah.
we had this lull of 1 month, we felt it. And then New York Times happened. We're like, okay, let's go. And in that context, we had to double our capacity. We produced almost 2 or 3 times more food, which means we actually had more expenses, but definitely had more patrons, and we're able to hit much higher numbers than we had in the past. But for us, so aligning to our values means financial stability. Those things need to be connected. And so when we think about the neighborhood that we're in, one, we want people to come to Comfort Kitchen and to be like, Uphams Corner is amazing. You can go to the Strand Theater. They have amazing shows. They're in a transition as well. They've got some great things coming. The neighborhood itself is a landmark. And so just honoring that place and inviting people to come and doing collaborations locally and saying, go to a show and come to dinner afterwards. Like, we want that ecosystem. We want to support that ecosystem that's there. We also have the clinic and places like that do a lot of important work. And so there is an intentionality around collaboration. And we have to hit certain numbers or we're going to disappear.
I just want to let that land. Yeah.
And I mean, it's similar to, I think, a lot of what you all are talking about, who can afford to be where and do what. It's like, if we're going to be here, we gotta, we're not going to ask our staff to take pay cuts. So let's, figure out. And like I said, we do, a fair amount of people on our team are from the local community. We have, I think, 20 languages spoken within our community of staff. We've got quite a range, some people that this is their second job maybe in life, and some where they've been working in the industry for 25 years. So a lot of different needs that people have. And so a lot of our energy really is towards the staff experience, living wage, thinking about their trajectory, understanding that so many of them, because we have so many great talents, eventually they're going to go on and they're going to do something else. And so it hurts, but yes, like celebrating that. And so we're very, very engaged in that process. And then with that, great food, great service, constant training, great food, great service, like a lot of energy towards that, of just wanting people to come and to feel what we want our staff to feel, which is welcomed and like their needs are being thought of and respected for how they are, who they are, how they show up in the space. So, there's a lot of thought in that.
I was kind of wondering, so just in thinking about how you worked through the pandemic to open Comfort Kitchen, we're now in this quote unquote post-pandemic time. And Boston, like many cities, is trying to figure out what to do with its downtown, because a lot of people are not commuting in. A lot of people are staying home. They're staying in the neighborhoods. And Melony, you can probably speak more to this, but I think the neighborhoods are seeing more activity because people are not having to commute. So now they're patronizing their local establishments more. Mm-hmm. Are you feeling that? Are you seeing that? Or do you see a way in which you can tap into that somehow?
I would say yes. And I would say maybe, I would say a third of our customers are neighborhood folks, people that know. What's that?
That's remarkable.
Yeah, I would say around there. And then, 2/3 are people who travel and who are like, I'm curious, what is this place? And some people become regulars from that. Some other people are just like, all right, that was an interesting experience. so there can be a lot of movement and like who comes in and out. And what we do find is that in terms of customer engagement, so far it has been publications and influencers that have made the biggest impact. We had one influencer come, and that was through Mainvest. Did a very cool thing. Mainvest was one of the places that we got funding through, which was also community-based investment. So people could invest as little as $150, and they get compensated as we become successful. So I'm not so sure if like the downtown, I'm sure it's having some impact in terms of people wanting to eat more locally. But yeah, we find that like we can track when we have more customers based on events or things that take place, like social media or written pieces.
I'd say two things about your offerings. One, we're talking about with Derek, you mentioned vodka, right? You all have and I don't drink alcohol at all, but I know enough to know that you have a very sophisticated, I guess what you call it, like drinks program. Like you've got very experienced bartenders. And so that's its own thing.
Yeah.
It's significant that this Black and immigrant and woman-owned restaurant has a liquor license in the city of Boston in this neighborhood. Okay.
Yeah.
Not a high rent, not a high price neighborhood. So that's one piece. And two, that you're saying that a third of your patrons are from the neighborhood. That says so much about how you structured your menu to make it so that people can afford to come regularly. So can you just talk about that? And if there's anything to say about that breathing, like you and the neighborhood communing together.
Sure. I mean, one is just want to acknowledge. So Kaisha Davenport is our beverage director and general manager. So one thing about us, solid team, strong team. And so that was like her magic, right? Like she came in and she was like, I'm doing magic over here. I'm just going to go do this research. So she spends a lot of time just doing research, learning about, somebody had said to me, because we really try to prioritize BIPOC producers for our, offerings in produce, but also in the liquor that we use. And somebody was like, oh, are you going to find enough? And I was like, yeah, I think so. I think we'll be all right. Thank you. So she has created a phenomenal menu. And one aspect of that as well is that we have non-alcoholic. I also don't drink alcohol.
Which I'm so grateful for, because that's why I go up to the bar. Yes.
That's why I add the vodka. There's a good non-alcoholic drink. Yes. I need to add the vodka.
That's it. Got it.
I suppose you can always add. I didn't know that, Derek, that you.
Oh, yes. Yes. So, thank you to the bartender. I tipped well. I made sure to tip well.
Yes. So, definitely trying to consider other people, right? And Kaisha and I had talked about it because I was like, I don't drink alcohol, but I want a cute drink.
Thank you.
I would like a glass of something, so she's very attentive to that and wanting to create that for other folks as well. She did that at Tanam where she was as well. So there's that. And then with the liquor licensing, I mean, the entire liquor licensing is an elusive process. We basically just followed the track and prayed. And that was because, and we had one lawyer who, and I'm going to forget the name right now, but I can follow up. But there was one lawyer that took interest in our application and said that they were willing to support us. We have since passed that lawyer to other folks as well that have been interested. But, it's really, you can try and navigate it ourselves. And we've had friends that have tried, I think, getting some kind of representation to at least be able to explain what's happening, because there's a lot of what? So I have to, okay. So I filled out this form, so I have to fill it out again. Yes. And apply again. So there's a lot of, if you miss a particular time period, you have to keep applying. Your application doesn't like stay in a folder somewhere. So it's a even as someone who has gone through it, very confusing by design. I'm confident of that. But having a liquor license, I mean, again, when I talk about financial viability and our ability to survive, if we did not have a liquor license, I think we were thinking we would just have beer and wine, we would continue to struggle. And we are struggling still, by the way, because we just opened, but it's a different kind of struggle. Restaurants need liquor licenses, period. They need it. It's when we think about, just revenue, we need that. So I wish I could share more in terms of how it went. It was just a really intense experience, and we never knew what was going on, but we did have legal representation. And I'm sure, people that advocated for us, we had an amazing colleague of ours who owns Tres Gatos. His name's David, and he has supported us. If you're familiar with Tres Gatos and JP, and he owns several other restaurants as well, but he has just fought for us. Like every event where, we had an abutters meeting and stuff, he'll come and he'll be like, give them something, so we've had people, other restaurant owners, community people who have advocated, I'm sure, in front of us, but also behind closed doors. I'm confident about that. And so this is a testament of people who believe in a concept.
And that's also a community in a different kind of way. The restaurant community, the food community that I don't think I won't speak for you, Melony, but I don't think you and I had been thinking about in terms of the community in that sense. So that's also an important one to think about too, the business community that is supporting you in ways that I know I have no background in. Melony, I don't know if you do, but just the ways in which they can support you that way too. I also wanted to just give a shout out to your team. So you mentioned your team. Melony mentioned that it is women owned and immigrant owned and people of color owned. So I was on your website and I found these photos. I just wanted to highlight the folks who were behind the scenes as well. That's you on the far right. And then also the food. So even though I mentioned the drinks, the food there is fantastic. So I wanted to just highlight the food just to make sure folks realize I'm not just about the drinks. The food is delicious and it is 100% worth going for all the dishes. Are they seasonal? I think they're seasonal. Do they change seasonally or am I just imagining that?
Yes, we're in the process of shifting the menu. We have a couple pieces, the duck in particular, where it will be hard to let it go. So it's a very slow process of bringing in what our next menu items are going to be. But we're working on it. We're calling it our passport menu, which will be going to a new destination to be shared soon.
Lovely. And then you're a cafe by day. So it's like a place where people can come and just hang out.
Yeah, so that brings me back to your last point, Melony. So we knew that we needed to have different income levels and opportunities for people you can come for lunch if dinner is a little bit more expensive for you. Dinner is an experience. It is intended to be, and then if you come for lunch, you have a lot of different options. It is self-service and we do try to make it a vibe as well. And people can hang out. You can use your computer, have some coffee. Come on down, friends.
I love this. I want to go ahead, Derek.
No, I was just thinking, and Nyacko, correct me if I'm wrong. It sounds like in addition to you all being rooted in the community, the community can find its roots in you as well, through the food, through the people, through the languages, through all of that.
Yes, definitely. And they can use our space as well. So if they say, I want to do this event, it's like, all right, let's talk about it. What would that look like? Where would you like it? So there is opportunity for people to kind of engage. They can also do caterings and things like that, where we come in and we support the food and sometimes support in other ways as well. So it is a collaboration.
It's lovely. I wanted to ask a question that it ties to what we're talking about you all choosing Uphams Corner in this way and slow building relationships there in a way that should last for hopefully generations, but last for a very long time. And at the same time, your family wanted to be walking distance from
Yeah.
this restaurant. And you're ready for your next home, looking for your next home. And again, the choosiness, right? It's tough. You've ended up being in a different community
Yeah.
that is special in its own ways. But do you want to just say anything about that,
Sure.
about where you're wanting to be and putting down roots for your own intergenerational family that's all connected to the restaurant?
Yes. Yes. Yeah. Um, I mean, so one is that so we had a condo in Dorchester, in a beautiful condo that we love so much. And we're so happy who has it now. And
Yeah.
that's something that, and thank you, Melanie, for that. But just a very intentional process with that as well. But and then, it was like what you were describing at the beginning, Melanie. So, and then I was like, and we're having a child. So this 2 bed, okay, it's getting a little tight. And then it's like, and we want my spouse's parents to live with us. Okay, now we're really pushing it. So it was like we needed something, and being the people that we are, we make it work.
Oh yeah.
We make it work, and but around, I think it was 2021, we felt like this is a good time to sell, and we know we need to sell, and so we did that. And then we ended up renting for almost 2 years, like a year and a half. And that was great. It was enough space. It was still tight, but it was enough space. And
And
I
close
think
to
it
the
was
restaurant.
yeah, it was close to the restaurant. We could walk. And so it worked. Um, and then, yeah, and then there was the whole process of having a child and bringing that child in, and me thinking really like, I want Justice to have a playroom, and I want him to be able to go outside. And I had all these like that I didn't feel before. And so then it became just a vision of like really thinking about, and I had a conversation with Melanie and Kelsey about what I'm longing for, what do I want to see. And I remember you reframing me, Melanie, of like, you have to say it as if it's happening. Like, you have to say it's happening, if you want to manifest this.
Yeah.
And I was like, by this time next year, I want to be in my home. And here I am sitting in my office. I'm taking it as sometimes what I originally wanted, which was to be close to the restaurant. Now I enjoy the distance.
Yeah.
Like it's nice, like that there's some kind of almost physical separation, because otherwise it can really be all consuming. I appreciate the quiet of where we are, and I appreciate the space that we have. And I don't know if we would have, I mean, certainly would not have been able to afford it, but I don't know if we would be able to find this kind of very distinctive house that is almost bizarre in its setup, is perfect for
For who
me,
you
who needs
are.
an office off the side of the house. So it just, yeah, I mean, everything happens for a reason. I never thought that I would own a house. So I'm still there. It's like,
Yeah.
wow,
Yeah.
okay.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
for it to be, and then it's an old house. It has all this, and my spouse put a lot of work into it, maybe a month of work before we even moved in. And I'm still like, how luxurious.
I want to give a shout out to my colleague, my business partner, Kelsey Evans, for identifying this house and
Yes.
making sure that you got it. And yeah, it's huge. It's a lovely kind of closing of a circle, because just talk about 6 months. 6 months ago, you and I were on a panel that we had Derek moderate for us about the power of Black people owning property at the annual summit
Yeah.
that Boston All Black hosts, and we talked about this. You were sitting in the kind of like, how could this happen? Can I even allow myself to vision this? When we happened to do this panel together, so
Yeah.
to look at us 6 months later and that you're living that,
Mhm.
is significant. It is so significant that you're Black, Asian, intergenerational, multilingual, working class family
Yes.
owns a house
Yes.
in Boston.
Yes. Profound. Yeah. And I remember when we were doing the panel and I was like trying to get out of it because I was like, why are you choosing me? I don't even own a house right now. I'm in an apartment. And you're like, no, this makes sense. And I was like, okay. But being on the panel, it was like speaking it into existence. Like literally, it was like, affirm yourself. Affirm yourself. You're about to speak on a panel. Affirm yourself. And yeah, I mean, I don't want to be a cliche, but there's such a power to just affirming what you want in your life and also being open to how it manifests, right?
Yeah.
So it's like, yeah, sure. Yes, I would love to be a millionaire and have this. And it's like, okay, great. And it's like, this is my idea of luxury. What I'm in right now, this is luxury right now. Every day I'm like, oh, not my office. Like, wait, so just being really clear and like realistic and like why you want it, right? Like, I want it for my family. Like, I want it so that we can have a peaceful relationship so that my father-in-law can rest, but also go walk around the neighborhood with his grandson. Like, I want that for all of us, that kind of like rest, which no one in my family really centers rest.
Yes.
But there was a bit of a reset in moving here. And so, yeah, so I'm very clear about the desire and the why.
Yeah. And I thank you so much for saying all that. And I root for you and your family in what you're doing because you are building community. You're helping us all build community with your restaurant and restaurants, because I'm sure there's more to come. And that you all have a place for yourself to recover, to be rejuvenated is so significant. And that, one of the themes that we had when we hosted that panel at the Boston While Black Summit or How to Boston While Black Summit is, we can own things. We can own things. We can own things.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I also want to tie in that this conversation, the last things you said, Nyacko, ties into some things that Sheena was saying on her episode of this podcast about how Black Boston, and by extension, immigrant Boston, has to ask for space. We don't own a lot of spaces, and so we have to ask for space. And I like how by having your restaurant, by having your home, you don't have to ask for those spaces anymore. You are providing those spaces for Black and immigrant Boston to be in without having to ask for it, without having to ask for permission. Mm-hmm. And this conversation and some of the points you made also, to some degree, tie in with the conversation we had with Wendy around investing. And granted, this is a slightly different conversation, but we were talking about how immigrant communities are always trying to buy a piece of the American dream and to redefine what that means for them in order to feel at home and to feel secure and feel comfortable. So, I see what you're doing is tying in, not just with your community, but with the community that we're creating through this podcast as well. So I appreciate everything you just said.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me. It's always a pleasure. And I just appreciate both of you for how you have created community through the questions that you've asked and the way in which you choose to engage with me, but people in general, how you choose to connect with us on deeper levels. I really appreciate that. Thank you for having me. Thank you for your engagement.
No, it's been great having you here. And I wanted to make sure, so we said Comfort Kitchen many, many times. We showed some images, but I wanted to make sure we also put up the website. So in case people want to see more, learn more, or if you live in Boston, live near Boston, or are going to Boston, you can go to comfortkitchenboss.com and go check them out. Don't wait for the next New York Times article. Just go there yourself.
Follow them on Instagram. They have such a lovely, lush Instagram feed. So Comfort Kitchen Boss is, I believe, your Instagram handle.
Yes. Yeah.
Hang out there, and that will entice you to get over to the rest.
Thanks.
So, yes, no, thank you. Thank you again for joining us. We really appreciate having you on the show. I also want to thank everybody who watched today's episode. If you have any questions for us or for Nyacko, please leave them in the question or comment section on wherever you're watching or listening to us, and we will try to respond to you as soon as we can. Also, please remember to subscribe when you see that subscribe button, and we will look forward to seeing you on the next episode of the Black Lining Forum. Take care, everyone.
Be well.
Thanks.